And they all have a story, right? A story of coming here, a story of you know, if you want to call it the American dream, or the, you know, it's the African dream, it's the human dream, to be successful, to come to a place and to make a life for yourself and your family. And each of our panelists have their stories. Over the 30 years that, you know, African Services has been doing what we do, all of us know having status is important, right? And it is now more important than ever. Can you go to work? Can you find a job? Are you able to do so legally? Those are all things that are super important on the legal services that we provide, just so that you're aware. And also refer people, right? Refer people to African Services.
I'm Hawa. So I came here in 1993 when I was 7 years old, and I came from Nairobi. I came with a group of refugees. My mother at the time had 5 kids, and her and my father were parting ways just after the war. And she thought if she sent one child to go with a group of people that she knew, it'd be easy for her to get sponsorship for the other 4 plus herself. That never happened. My family till today has never been in America. I grew up in Seattle with 10 people that I came with for some time, and then I found myself a community of Americans that really took me in and took good care of me, some being white Americans, some being black Americans, some being other refugees that were Ethiopian. I think my saving grace was that very early on I was able to recognize what community looked like, because I came from such a solid one back home. Seattle was so welcoming and warm, and for a 7-year-old girl to feel completely safe and taken care of and not afraid had so much to do with the people that were able to shelter me. I started to do modeling thinking it'd be fun, and it really became a career quite fast. So I ended up being raised by an African American family. For a big chunk of my formative years was spent with Americans and not really around Somali people. So I always did feel very much like a minority in a minority group. So when I came to New York City, I think one of the things that was so interesting to me was, you know, all of a sudden I had friends from Togo, I had friends from Nigeria. I met Claude, you know, in 2006, 2007. I wasn't even 21 yet. So things like that were for me, I was like, oh, tough, I should know more about Africa. Because Somalis are very much an insular group of people. We don't assimilate no matter where we go. Africa, we haven't really gone further than Kenya, you know? And that's not by choice. I think it was really interesting to come here and find another set of community, you know, people who my core aligned with, who shared like I did, who ate food that I loved, who spoke many languages and had dual identities, which I did, but my American friends didn't. I think that would be the difference between there and here.
And I want to transition to American African, because, you know, if those of us from Togo, we always look to Nigeria, because there's so many Nigerians dominating the whole of the ECOWAS, you know, Economic Community of West African States zone. And, you know, many Nigerians, I will say, who move to America, they're coming here because they want to be either doctors or lawyers, right? And so, I don't know if there's any Nigerians in the room. Any Nigerian lawyers? No. There you go. Shimite's parents came because they were interested in medicine. And so they came, and I want you to talk about growing up as a first-generation American who's being brought up by Nigerian immigrants.
As Claude said, I'm Nigerian, and my parents were physicians in Nigeria. They went to Ahmadu Bello University, and they met there and decided they wanted to come to the States for better opportunities. The truth is, I wouldn't be where I am were it not for the sacrifices of my mom and her father. My mom wanted to come here, and she had an opportunity to study at Johns Hopkins to do her master's in public health, but didn't have the money. My dad, I think he was able to pay his way, but wasn't able to get the right visa, so he had to go to the UK first. So my dad goes to London, he had family there, and he worked as a security guard. He's a physician at this point. My mom struggled to come here, and as it turns out, her dad, my grandfather, who's now passed, decided that, you know, he was going to give up his whole pension to send her to this country. He was working as a librarian for the U.S. government. He decided to give up his pension and have his first daughter come here. And so really that sacrifice that he made really permeated through our whole family. My uncle, several of our family have come here and kind of been supported by our family that we started here. I really think of them as kind of like the anchor that allowed a lot of our other family to come.
When you say here, can you be a little bit more specific as to where it is here?
So I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We then moved to St. Louis, then to Gadsden, Alabama, and then to Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I grew up. Kind of went where the opportunity was, and then landed in Atlanta. I grew up in Atlanta, and then went off to school, went to North Carolina, and then moved up here for law school.
And then you're an entrepreneur, but what do you actually do as a...
So, are you going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer? I told my dad, like, I think I'm going to be a sociologist. And my dad is like, you know how many sociologists are unemployed? And so I pursued law, and I'm a lawyer. I feel like it's like a bad. I'm an attorney. I work at another law firm, and I do startup venture capital work.
Well, thank you for being so honest as to the career choices and the choice points. Since you really just started making a name for yourself as a very, very generous culinary expert, but who also had bigger dreams. And you come from Dakar, which is actually, my mom would not want me to say this, which is actually my favorite African city. I love Dakar. And can you tell us about how you came from Senegal to the United States and what the early part of your journey was?
It's a long story.
We have time.
Well, I was born and raised in Dakar, and I never thought of coming to America. I never even thought of becoming a chef. This wasn't even any of my dreams. I came from a culture where cooking is a gender-based activity and kitchen belongs to women. So I was a student in Dakar in the late 80s, a physics and chemistry student. I wanted to become an engineer. Not a lawyer, not a doctor. But the late 80s in Dakar was marked by strikes. Student strikes were like all over, and this was a particular year where, my second year of physics and chemistry, where the government decided to shut down the school system because of the strikes. We had too many days of strikes. And people like me, we just couldn't take it, that we had to start over a whole new year. And we looked for applications in different countries, and that's how I get a student visa to come to America. I was actually on my way to Ohio, out of all places, to continue my degrees in physics and chemistry. Decided to visit New York. That's almost a movie, right?
Yes.
Decided to visit New York. A friend of mine gave Pierre, and I said, okay, I'm going to stop back for a couple of weeks. And 3 days later, everything I was wrong 3 days later, pretty much. And I was stuck in New York, and I hated New York. New York at that time was the crack AIDS epidemic. I mean, it was just the worst part. And I was living it not too far from here, Times Square. And Times Square at the time was not what you know now. That was before Giuliani. So it was prostitutes and drugs, and so I came from Dakar. Dakar was definitely much more gentle. So when we returned, I had my so-called hotel where we were staying. I can't even begin to describe that hotel. So he was working at a restaurant in the village, in the West Village at the time, and they were looking for a busboy, and he just thought of me. He was from Senegal too. He was like, "There's a busboy position. Why don't you apply? At least you make some money. You can save and continue to Ohio." And so I applied, and that job just changed my whole view of the whole restaurant world. Really, there was a restaurant called Garvin's. It was serving the new American cuisine. The chef was trained in Paris. He loved the French culture, and he adopted me because I was speaking French. I became kind of he became a mentor to me. You know, I was looking for extra shifts. So from doing busboy, doing my day jobs, at night I would go in the kitchen. I love what was happening in the kitchen, but by the way, that's really what fascinated me. I was looking at the plates looked amazing. And it reminded me of this particular book. My mother had a collection of cookbook collection when I grew up. And I would spend countless hours just looking at the pictures of the book. I didn't know I was going to be into cooking, but the pictures just amazed me. It was like so beautiful and salivating. And the plates I was looking at this new restaurant I was looking at just looked like those pictures. So I guess I would be in the kitchen just looking at the plates instead of doing my job. And the chef saw it as like a sign that I was interested into this. Billy, his name was, he just took me one day, like, would you like me to coach you into this? I think you like it, and you like it. So anyway, to make a long story short, he took me from dishwasher. He started the hard way. I hated it even more. And dishwasher, started peeling potatoes and onions, and over the years, I did prep and garde-manger and the grill and all the station in the kitchen. Till I graduated from that kitchen. And also I was just spending time, I was starting to really love what I was doing and spending time just self-teaching myself in New York Public Library, tons of Julia Child books, and then going back into the kitchen and practicing it. I left from that restaurant, another restaurant opened up in the meatpacking district actually, before it became the big thing that it is now. And I was hired with my qualification of like a line cook now, so I could just like come and get a little bit of money. At that time I forget about going to Ohio, I was loving it. And that's gradually from different restaurants in New York City. At the time there was plenty of jobs for us. From different restaurants in New York City, I worked my way up to becoming a chef de cuisine at this place in Soho that had just opened in the mid-90s. And that place, the vision of that place was global ethnic cuisine. It wasn't just classical Italian or French, which was what I was doing before. So when global ethnic came, and the executive chef was an American chef who had traveled the world, and he was bringing food from Southeast Asia. And he was interested particularly to me because I could bring flavors that didn't exist here before. And that really, he's the guy who would really say, kind of pushed me into what I'm doing right now. Because I was in New York City, and at the time there was no such thing as African cuisine in New York, and it was still the food capital of the world. So it was something, a challenge to take. I started collecting recipes. I had just told my parents before that I forget about physics and chemistry. my mom was very supportive. She was very much into food, so she gave me lots of recipes which I was writing down and bringing to the restaurant and making it as special. First serving it for the family, the staff, and seeing their reaction. I just knew I had something going, and we know we had good food in Africa, and we just victim of this bias, and people don't know until they taste it. And the first time I did a special at the restaurant, and that was a peanut sauce actually, vegetarian one, and Faith had it that same day. There was a food critic that came to the restaurant, and she fell for this dish, and she wrote about it, and that completely changed everything for me. I was like, I gotta go Africa. And she was so generously about it, I probably just still remember the words that she used, and that was still in the 90s. And over the years, I collected recipes from my mom, and those recipes, I realized that they filled up a couple of notebooks. I decided to work into getting a book together. My first book, I approached the photographer Adam Bartos, who was also very established at the time. And he took up the challenge, and we traveled to Senegal together. And we took photos of family. That was a book about the food that inspired my cuisine. So that was about my family. We traveled to the village, the grandmothers, the aunts, who were a tribute to the women of Africa. So like I said, they're the ones who really inspired the cuisine that I cook today. And with those photos and the recipes and the introduction, we started to shop for a publisher. And we found this publisher, Lake Press, who was still my publishers today. So it became a great love story between me and them. And the book was a finalist of the Julia Child Award, which is something that was really poetic justice to me. That she was really part of how I got into teaching myself into cooking.
I think you answered the question. Yeah, we This is so inspiring, but there's one word that you mentioned that really resonated with me, and it was the word mentor. And I think a few of us can relate to that. I mean, I came to this city 20 years ago. I didn't know anyone. I had less than $3,000 doing things. And every opportunity I have to thank Ben Hardison, I have to thank Sylvia Rohn, and I have to thank Iman, who really helped me to settle in the city and to really become an entrepreneur when Trace Magazine, Trace TV was really just a twinkle in my eye. So I want you to elaborate a little bit on the importance of mentorship, because I think it's very important to this conversation we're having.
Well, without mentors, to me, I wouldn't be here for sure. They just not only allow me to believe that what I was dreaming was a possibility, that those guys were already living that dream, that I wouldn't even allow myself to go to dream. I would dream it, and I would be like, no, you this little kid from the car, you can't just, So without these mentors, I wouldn't have that belief, that strength, the thing that pushed me. So yes, it was important. And Billy and Chef Jeffrey Murray, both of them were like very much, these people for me. And I think it's important that you can find people on your path, people that you can look up to and you can talk to and you can guide you, because those people have to be references in a way. They have to have walked that path, and that's how they become mentors to you. They can come in many different ways. I mean, you become a mother, but Iman was not mentor to you, because back then as well. So I can imagine that it doesn't have to be, it didn't have to be a chef to be. I mean, I had other people that I used as like also as mentors. I mean, I mentioned these two people because that's the story I was telling, but they don't have to be particularly chefs. They just have to be people who succeeded on their path, on their journey.
Thank you. I want to come back to what you're doing now with Yolele, but before we do that, I want to ask Shimite a question, actually. Because when we first met, I could tell that you had this idea, 2016, you wanted to do something as an entrepreneur, even though you were working as a lawyer. And I could feel that you were also looking for mentorship and ideas, and I volunteered because I could see that you reminded me of me, which is sometimes how mentorship relationships develop. And I want you to tell us a little bit about why, even though you are a lawyer in a very big firm, very successful firm, and you do well with respect to M&A and different advice that you might give startups, why you decided to create ANOKO, because it's important for you to tell the story, the genesis of the story, and also explain why you chose the name ANOKO and what it means.
Okay. Yeah, I met Claude 2016. I really hustled to meet him. He was Bahraini panel, much like this one, at 154, which is an art fair. And I just, was captivated by the way he was speaking. And I kind of did the same thing with several people who are my advisors and mentors now. I think there's this hunger that you have to go after when you have that idea and risk rejection. But oftentimes you'd be surprised, people who are pretty successful say yes. But to take it a few steps back, I started ANOKO because I was unfulfilled at my job, and I was seeking community. I was seeking to get more involved in the arts in New York City. A lot of when you guys described the African Services Committee, I think that a lot of that resonated with me and resonates with me in terms of why I decided to start ANOKO. Looking for a place to call home, a place to support me. And when you're working, 80-hour weeks, you know, looking at this stuff. It's a very lonely lifestyle, I would say, and it can be unfulfilling. You're yearning for something, and you know, so that yearning pushed me to try to build something greater. And I also have a lot of creative energy within me. I sing, and so I wanted to explore that creativity. ANOKO means wealth in Igala, which is a Nigerian language. And the backstory behind ANOKO is so the original name of the company was Creatopia. Creatopia meaning like creative utopia, not so like, you know, groundbreaking. And I registered, you know, like as a lawyer, I was like, oh, let me get the trademark. And it got rejected because it was too similar to another name. Spelled differently, but sounds the same. So just like little advice for everybody here who might be thinking about registering a domain, registering a trademark. So I was like, oh my God, I have like business cards, and what am I gonna do? And I called my grandma and I thought, you know, let me think back to like trademark class in law school. I was like, well, you're supposed to pick like a distinctive name and something that like, you know, even though people might not know it, like can actually take on like this unique meaning. And so I thought, okay, well, now's my chance to like think deeper. And I called my grandma and I asked her to help me think through some names. So the truth is, like, I didn't name ANOKO. My grandma, she, you know, I gave her some, you know, somebody said, you know, this is about community, this is about empowerment, this is about wealth. And she gave me the name. And so that's the backstory.
And can you tell us a little bit more about what it is?
Sure. Sorry about that. So ANOKO is a private members club for diverse creatives and professionals, and we're all about bringing people together around art. We curate events around the city to do with all in the area of visual, performing, and culinary arts. Some of our members are here, people who are connected. One of my team members, Charles, is here. But really, an example of an event that we've done, in March, we curated a music event at the Norwood Club, which is a private club in Chelsea, around Fela Kuti. So we had an amazing group of musicians to come together and really channel Fela and pay homage to him. Last year, we curated the VIP lounge for the Volta Art Fair. I don't know anybody who's like into art, but it's the sister fair to the Armory show.
I saw
So,
that.
were you there last year?
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay, yeah, so we curated the VIP lounge. And people were really like, what is this? You know, like typically in these stuffy places, like you just don't see that kind of energy, like you don't see us there. And so, you know, we've been kind of punching above our weight and doing these events and trying to build community, build momentum. You know, and for us, next steps are to continue to grow our partnerships. Another aspect of the business is we have partnerships with different arts institutions, different restaurants around the city of New York. So we have a partnership with the King's Theater in Brooklyn, where our members get a discount on seating. A couple of restaurants around the city, including Chai Wale in Harlem, where we get like complimentary drinks. So for us, it's about continuing to grow our partnership and building out a digital platform for our members to actually connect with each other, and really like after our events kind of come together and be able to message and know what's going on. And then for us, like the big project is next year actually building out a physical space in the city. So that's the
All right.
ANOKO.
All right. Thank you so much. So I want to, you know, I always look at what's in a name, and you know, ANOKO is a very personal. It has meaning for you because of your grandmother and And with you, Hawa, I want to talk about Basbaas, and because it also has a very personal, deep meaning for you. I wanted you to talk about the name, why you chose this name, and what you actually do with the sauces and how you're marketing yourself in your company in this very tough and competitive New York and American environment.
Well, I chose Basbaas because it means chili in Somali. So very simple. And also it's something that people in this market could say quite easily. So anything that I do, and I'm thinking of from a marketing aspect, I'm always like, what do Americans feel comfortable saying? My name is Hawa. Growing up, people were like, Hawa? Like, what? Howie? Like, what? So I always try to remind myself of that anything that I associate myself with, whether it's cookbooks that I'm writing or the condiment line or other endeavors that I'm a part of that I've been able to create, I always say to myself, how does this tie in to what the people I'm selling feel comfortable saying and doing? So I started Basbaas out of pure selfishness. As I said earlier, I felt very disconnected from my community. And when I was getting ready to be done with modeling, I thought, okay, I'm going to become like my mom. My mom has been an entrepreneur my whole entire life. She was an entrepreneur in Kenya. They moved to Oslo. She's an entrepreneur there. So I said, how can I start having conversations that I get to be in control of the narrative? Yeah, I started thinking about who am I going to sell to? People that shop at Whole Foods. Who's that demographic? So I started doing what that looked like. I started doing research on what that looked like. And from there, I just started working my way backwards. I started Basbaas because I wanted to be in control. I wanted to connect with my community. I wanted to be at the table. And I knew that in America, I could do that if I slowly worked my way into the table. You know, I could have started with frozen foods or sambusas, which were ideas that I had in the beginning. But I thought, people here are willing to try sauces. You know, they're willing to try condiments. There's this whole thing about now folks are now maybe traveling as much because it's so expensive, but they're willing to try food as a segue into other cultures. So Basbaas chili, Somali foods, which is now growing into an umbrella of condiments from the continent, which is turning into cookbooks, TV shows. But all started with just 2 condiments at the table.
I want to stay with the entrepreneurial genesis a little bit, because you didn't have an MBA, you came out of the world of fashion, and the fashion business is very different from condiments, right? So how did you, and this is, I'm sure people in the audience are wondering, how do you just get started when you don't really necessarily have the background outside of maybe watching your mom and your family? How do you get started and define yourself as, I'm going to start and launch this venture?
Well, when you're a model, you're on a 1099, so you really are your own boss to some degree, right? So modeling really taught me about good bookkeeping, what that looked like, you know, being 19 years old and saying, okay, I'm gonna do my taxes, and this year I'm gonna get this back because I've saved these many receipts. This is before QuickBooks or FreshBooks or any of those things. Yeah, I mean, I think I approached modeling like a business. I knew that I'd be out before 10 years were up, before someone else told me to be out. So when I went into this, I don't think I ever thought of it as a new space. It was a continuation of where I already was, right. Which was a young woman running her own business within herself. And so, yeah, I went to the Small Business Association, you know. I looked up things. I sat with people who knew more than I did. I still sit with a lot of people who know a lot more than me. Usually the dumbest in the room, which is fine by me. I don't know. I mean, I've always been, in terms of business, I've always been 1, 2, 3, 4. How do I get from A to B? What does that look like? Who's done that? Who can I speak to? I mean, whether it be Pierre. Pierre and I have become very good friends over the last couple of years, and that probably has more to do with our food stuff in common, but mainly because Pierre has already been from A to B, you know? So yeah, I hope that answers the question, but
I think it does, because we get asked all the time, it's how do you start a business? Because everybody thinks it's so difficult. And I always say, just get started. And if it fails, then you have one learning. You know, my first venture was a failure. My second venture was a home run, a huge success. But you learn from your mistakes, right? And so many people are just afraid to start. And then, you know, I have friends who 3 years later are still talking about refining that business plan. I said, enough with that business plan, just get started, you know? Yolele, I really want us to spend 5 minutes. It's 8 o'clock, I was going to start Q&A now, but I really wanted to spend 5 minutes talking about Yolele, because for those of you who don't know what Yolele is doing, there's a huge feeling of excitement around your new venture. And I'll just tell you a funny story. On Friday, I met with the executive director of SOS Sahel, which is a really good NGO working in the Sahelian region to empower farmers. And he said, oh, I'm really excited because I'm going to see Pierre Thiam, because his whole concept of fonio and superfoods are going to change the way that African crops are viewed. And I said, well, it's so funny. I'm going to be on a panel with him on Monday. So the buzz is just deafening. And I just want you to give us, I know it's hard, but just a 5-minute version of how you got to launch this venture and what your plans are.
Well, fonio is a grain that's probably the oldest cultivated grain in Africa. And it's delicious. So as a chef, I fell in love with it. And I started doing some research on it. And doing the research, I found out that it was not only delicious, it was very nutritious. It's one of the fastest maturing grain, if not the fastest maturing grain in the world. And it's gluten-free, which is very helping right now. Rich in amino acids that are deficient in all of the grain. So for me, I saw all those signs as there's a potential for this grain, and it grows in the part of the world where nothing else grows, in the Sahel region of Africa, which is why I partnered with SOS Sahel to develop it. The idea for me was it was a social enterprise. Of course, it has to be sustainable. The idea is to make money for sure. But to make money while doing good was my vision, is to make money in collaboration with the parts of Africa that are the most deprived. I started collaborating with women cooperatives in that region of the Sahel, one in Kedugu where we started. And we have them, we train them, and we equip them into producing fonio, producing that grain. And we package the grain and sell it, find markets here in America for them. Not only in America, but around the world, and also in Africa, because we definitely don't want the quinoa story to repeat itself. We want to make sure Africans are served first, and this was about food security as well as about pride into our own products. And the product sells itself well because it's a great product. It's a great product because it's nutritious. It's a great product because it's delicious. It's versatile. Some of you, I see a friend over there who used it in restaurants around the world. So I want to recognize her. She has a beautiful restaurant in London. So to make a long story short, we started last year distributing fonio, and we have a few Whole Foods now. We are offered to even expand it. We have Amazon, we have Thrive Market, we have Cecil in the Bay Area. It's kind of like the Blue Apron of the West Coast. And it's growing. And the next step for us, we are about to set up a mill, like a factory in the growing region of Kedugu for fonio in South Senegal. And the factory will be buying fonio from the farm, the community that SOS Sahel is running. And SOS Sahel operates all the way from Senegal to Eritrea and all the countries in between. So they're training farmers in producing the fonio for our mill, and the mill will process the fonio. The steps right now, we are at the steps where fonio is being sold in grains. It's moving really fast at the moment. It's considered the fastest moving grain in its category, grain and beans together. So that's a great sign. Next year, we're turning into snacks. So fonio will be turned into chips, to ask us into nutrition bars. So that are the steps we're taking in 5 minutes.
We could keep going forever, and I really, again, as we give a round of applause and open it up to questions, I just have to say this. I recognize a few friends in the room. You know, those of us, Africans who've been able to do very well here in New York, I would say we could be split into 2 different categories. You know, I have a friend who's buying his 3rd Porsche, and he doesn't want to go back to Togo, and that's a choice, you know. And then there's those of us who decide to pay it forward and really help to empower Africa by bringing the best of Africa produces and bringing Africa to the world so that they can discover our creativity as well, because for too long, we've been told that what we create is worthless and everything that comes from the Western world is superior. And I really feel that people on this panel can change that narrative. And I really wanted to say that before I open it up to questions. So thank you. I want you to please ask a question by introducing yourself and keeping the question quite short. And please stand up.
Like we're standing up?
Yes, please. Is that difficult? I think we may have a mic. Is there a roving mic?
I'm Yolele, and I'm from Uganda. I think that is the best way to introduce myself. I was the first to put up my arm because I don't want my question to be asked. And I thank all the panelists and all the work they're really doing to kind of, come up and do all this good work they're doing. Before you answered the question, my question was because when you're talking about you going back to Africa when you first introduced yourself, and basically taking back the food back to Africa and working with African women, my question was going to come back to you and ask, how are you kind of empowering the women? Unfortunately, you've answered that fully well. And this question, I bring it back to both ladies. How are your innovative ideas going to affect African women, or basically come back to African Services Committee, like to immigration people? Because to me, my concern is always about how are we going to bring back to our community from where we've really come from. I've not heard any of you talk about how your innovation has really impacted or is you're looking forward to impact people like us who have got asylum or into the migration process. Basically, I'm putting African Services first because this is our home, and I'm asking how your work is really going to, or is impacting this particular group of people.
Thank you for this question.
Thank you. I'll start. So Basbaas is a social enterprise, and we partner with girls in Nairobi that have adequate support system like I did growing up. So we provide sanitary napkins and health information to school-age girls in Nairobi. One of the very first things that affects young girls is when they start their periods, they drop out of school. That's something that's incredibly important to me. Educate a girl, change your community. So I'll say that's what Basbaas the business does. As far as me offering myself to anyone in here tonight or to the community, I'm available. I'm here. And if there's anything that I can do, teach a cooking class, gather people, fundraise, I'm at your service. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you. Well, I think it's a really great question. So within right now we have over 500 members who are based in New York City. Within our membership, we have lawyers, we have doctors, we have engineers, developers, we have marketing professionals. I think that one of the things that we all have to understand is people work in these sort of informational asymmetries. You don't know what the person next to you needs. I don't know what you need. When we come together and we talk about it, when we share with each other, when we collaborate, I find that out. Maybe I have the skills to do the very thing that you need. Maybe my friend Hervé does. He's an architect in Haiti. So I think that one of the messages that I want to get across is, it's only by connecting with each other and talking to each other and getting to know each other that we help each other. And at the core, that is what ANOKO is. We're a community that understands the value of building social capital by connecting. So that's sort of like the big picture for us. We're starting here in New York City, and we're expanding. We hope to expand to other cities across the U.S., into Africa, on the continent, but we got to do well here first. So I hope that that kind of like gives some sense or some answer.
But it's a private members club.
No? Well, no, like, let's...
Oh, sorry, there's a question
Oh, no.
over here.
I was just saying...
No, we have to keep it to... Okay. We want to take 3 questions.
This is my voice. I was just saying, is it a private members club?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Grace Obomalaya, and I'm from Uganda. I've been here for many, many years, and I work as an attorney representing children in child protective cases in New York. And the question that I have, which I have seen in my work, is that there is a class distinction between Africans who are affluent and Africans that I tend to work with, the communities that I work with, where they have very, very few resources. And I would love to know if that is something that could be developed amongst you guys, because I have clients who have no connections, who have no access to education, to internships, to mentors, and that is something that's desperately needed. So that's the question, suggestion that I put out to you. I think it would be really of great benefit. There's so many African families that come here and have just very little contact and connections to move their families and their children forward and to be able to achieve the way that you all have been able to.
So what is the actual question?
The question is, I mean, does that exist? Because I see you guys and how to make that connection. I see that there are opportunities being provided for Africans in Africa, but we have so many Africans here in the United States, in New York, who have very little access to, I think, what they need in order to be able to advance in this society.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, I think that we have to dig further into what the needs are, because if it's legal needs, okay, no.
No, I'm saying the opportunity to have mentors, for example.
Mentorship,
You all are
okay.
here, you're doing wonderful work. There are children and families that are in the Bronx, which is where I work, where they're involved in the court system, they're involved in the juvenile justice system. They don't have access to internships. They're not doing anything in the summers because they don't have the resources to do a summer camp, to do an unpaid internship, for example. And I think that there's so much human resources here of Africans who could make those connections for them, who could help them, but even the community-based organizations may not have access to those resources, which would be people like you guys.
It happened to us. I mean, and ask of anybody in here. There's a lawyer here that grew up in the Bronx. I don't know where she went, but she's done incredibly well for herself. She could be a resource for you. I could be a resource for you. I know about day camps here in New York City, or a friend that runs one, I think getting out and networking, if you're a voice for them, then just the same way that you brought us this question or this suggestion is maybe the first step, but I would love to help in any way that I can. And I think everyone here should be willing to offer themselves or their connections. I'm sure we all know somebody who runs a program in the summer or knows of someone.
Yeah, and I'm happy to offer up, let's talk about collaborating, because maybe we could set up something more formal where our members could actually be mentors. And then by extension, like I was talking to Uzo about, like, you know, a group of female attorneys that we're trying to gather and come together. Each one of those could be a mentor, you know? So I think, like, again, it comes back to relationships, understanding the need, and then saying, all right, I know somebody who's really looking for this kind of opportunity.
I want to move to this question here.
Hi, my name is Arthur Chupo. I'm from Cameroon, and I work in the city now, and I'm going to relocate soon to Cameroon, working in private equity. My question is for actually the panel, right? And it's linking entrepreneurship in Africa. Can you talk a bit about the challenges you face working in Africa, you know, with Africans and for the US market or any other market? Like, what are the challenges? I think in the room there's a lot of Africans here excited about the entrepreneurship momentum over there. And often we don't know about the challenges there. We talk about perseverance, about don't let it go. I mean, can you just share your experience and, you know, so that we know more about it? Thank you.
Well, in the case of this particular venture portfolio, we faced many challenges, that's for sure. It's like we had to create a change value that didn't exist before. And that's one of the reasons why we build in the mill, because the processing is key. You know, if you don't have the proper processing, a certain standard of processing, you cannot expect to export outside of the continent. So those are the challenges that we were facing. But the exciting challenges, they seem daunting. But when you look at you keep your eyes on the prize, it's really exciting. It's really you're really contributing to developing your country, your community, and you're doing something that's quite unique. And it's like it's your journey. You know, it's what's important is really just to make a difference at the end of the day. So you will face some challenges. You make sure you prepare for that when you return to Cameroon. You will face some challenges anywhere you go in the continent. But those challenges are opportunities more than anything else, because once you face them and you overcome them, the return is much higher than where it would be.
I want to add to that because I've been very deeply involved in the youth entrepreneurship movement, because I created in 2013 the Young Entrepreneurs Forum in Togo. And what happened was we have trained thousands of young entrepreneurs since 2013, and we now have partners, you know, including Harvard Business School. And what's really interesting when we're looking at the data, which I just looked at about 2 weeks ago, is in a French-speaking country like Togo, many of the young entrepreneurs that I interview every August tell me that they become entrepreneurs because they couldn't become civil servants. So the government does not create new jobs anymore, so as the entrepreneurial path becomes the default path, the backup plan, plan B. And then what's really interesting in the data that we were able to collect for the past 5 years is that we give a prize every year in December, and 50% of the prize winners are women, even though only 12% of the applicants are women. So what's happening is the most astute and able young entrepreneurs that I've actually encountered in Togo are women. And I actually have been very involved with a program, also Pan-African program called the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, which is created by Barack Obama and funded by the State Department and USAID. So as part of, I'm the leader of the entrepreneurial path in the YALI program. And I've been to 14 countries as part of the YALI program. And again, what we find is the most able and hardworking entrepreneurs tend to be women. So that's a key insight. And I feel like we have to do something with that, because they just are more responsible managers, right? And then I look at some of the prize winners from 4 or 5 years ago. As soon as they get the money, they go out and party with their friends, whereas the women are much more responsible. Some of them are others, and who've been able to create these fantastic companies that, with a bit of mentorship, could just really take it all the way. But it's really about building their self-confidence. So we could talk about that, and I can share the study with you. But it's there's a lot to learn. We have time for one more question in the back over there. No, 2 more. Sorry, you've been raising your hand. 2 more. 1 and then 2, and that'll be the final question.
I don't think I need a mic.
Okay.
It's fine. So my name's Eric Akoto. I'm an editor of a literary magazine. I'm visiting your lovely city from London for 3 weeks, and I think it's amazing what all 4 of you have done. It's a real inspiration for both myself and Zoe. And a question I wanted to ask, and you've answered it slightly, Claude. We've been communicating via social media. Just what's the amount of government support that you get for the initiatives that you guys put together? And is it really supportive, or is there more you feel needs to be done? Because I know you're running a private members club. I'm just wondering how you finance all of the great work you're doing if the government supports it. That's a question. That's to everyone.
Yeah, ladies first, and then I can.
I haven't gotten government support. I think that most entrepreneurs, it's not really government funding you're getting. It's private capital.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes I guess you might get a small business loan, if that's considered support. You know. But I think it's more perhaps in a medical, sort of pharmaceutical, where you're more likely to maybe get a grant, NIH grant or something like that. But I feel like most of the entrepreneurs that I work with and myself, it's private investment, private capital. Which I wanted to just make the comment that one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs, both here and on the continent, is access to capital.
Yeah.
And so I think that comes down to a lot of it, your network.
Is it harder than talent?
Well, I'd say those are both pretty high up there, but access to capital.
Is it the talent? I don't think so.
Yeah, I've been running, sorry to interrupt, we're all here to listen to you guys. I've been running the publication in London for 15 years, and I've come across those similar challenges, really sort of raising government support, but most of the time it is private funding, and my platform is free, so it's open-ended platform where we're encouraging guys like what you're doing to tell their stories, but also for our readers to connect and have sort of conversations, especially cross-cultural conversations, and learning about people free. But it's, as I say, it's, as you just mentioned, it's always private funding that we have.
Yeah, and I will say that there feels like there's like a tide change happening right now. I don't know if people heard about Arlen Hamilton. She's with Backstage Capital, and she's made a commitment to invest $36 million in Black female founders. I don't know if you guys heard about Rich Dennis, who sold his company to Unilever earlier, and he's dedicated $50 million a fund for women of color. So there's like there's a few of my clients who actually have funds who are Nigerian or Black American. So it's like, it's changing.
It depends on the industry, because I don't want to damper this whole enthusiasm, but in my own personal ventures, 20 years of being an entrepreneur, all my investors were American companies. My company Trace was funded by Goldman Sachs. My latest company, TRUEAfrica, was funded by Google. And I really went to so many countries in Africa to try to convince these high net worth Africans to fund creative industries, and they're just not interested. So, we just have to be very real about this. I mean, just last week in Paris, I had a conversation with Tony Elumelu, the Nigerian businessman, banker, who committed $100 million to funding ventures in Africa, and he's one of the pioneers. But the reality is, a lot of African ventures do not attract African funding. And we just have to be very, very real with that. And I think that needs to change, because there's a lot of money in Africa. And I think that if we're going to be thinking globally, we have to change that paradigm. Same in Haiti. Yeah. One final question here, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christelle Anou. I am originally from Cameroon. I am the African Deal Advisor at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. So essentially, my role is to do a lot of outreach with the African community here in New York City. I go to a lot of different community events. I educate New Yorkers about their rights when it comes to discrimination in housing. So I am very excited to be here. Thank you so much for sharing all of your beautiful stories. I also believe in the power of storytelling, because it's very important for us to be able to share our own stories. My question, in doing the work that I've done thus far with the community in New York City, which is definitely growing, but we don't necessarily always have a lot of opportunities to be able to share stories or to be able to get access to resources. I wanted to know if you are thinking, maybe individually or as a group in the future of creating either mentorship ventures for other young Africans to be able to also learn from your story, and to basically continue the work, continue to move the work forward. And also, I also wanted to share that in my work, I have actually had a meeting with the New York Women Foundation, and they are actually looking to, provide funding to women who are doing a lot of work, with other women in New York City. And so, if anyone is here is interested, please, do see me, and I would love to work with all of you, and so we can continue this amazing work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to answer the question part of the statement, or does anybody want to?
I feel like it's kind of piggybacking off what we said. I think all of us here are open to mentorship, but then I think it also kind of stretches beyond just us, and us thinking about who we know too. So I think the first step is just getting the contact information, keeping in touch, so that you're top of mind. So when I think about people who are looking for mentorship opportunities, I think of you. So I think and then as far as my club, I absolutely want to implement a mentorship program. I think as we grow, that's going to be really important. So I'm happy to connect with you, and yeah.
I see one final question over there. I said no more, but please make it short because we're out of time. It's 8:30.
Super quick. Sorry, my name's Zoe. I'm a chef, writer, and restaurateur from London. I think what everyone probably would appreciate in this room is there some kind of resource pool where you could get networking, meet-up information, with this lady's organisation? I don't know, is there a place where anybody can go to get these resources and information so they can make these connections? Anyone?
I mean, it's funny because the board members are looking at me and saying, we need to give this some thought. But one of the things that, African Services as a hub has been is when we even talk about our permanent home and all of the things we talk about is about being a hub for the community and a place for having resources. And that's really, I think everyone has sort of lit an idea here because there's a small connection piece that seems to be missing, right? There, we have the connection with sort of like our panelists and folks like our panelists, but then there's also this need for mentorship, right? But we have that community space. And so, we do that on a small scale, but it really is beginning to, like I said, all the board members have been looking at me and saying, we really need to think of that as well in terms of our creative space. And I'll let Clancy speak as well, but one of the other things we had thought about when we were opening, looking for a new home, and that process is continuing, is we were really looking at a space that would be designed and was specifically designed to have that hub in the middle, right? That space, that community space in the middle where we can come together and build those sorts of connections, right? And I'll let Clancy speak as well.
Kind of just I'm a former board member of Clancy Miller.
I didn't just former, so.
Literally last week. I want to thank you all, and I'm dovetailing on your question and what you just said. Hawa and I think you too, are possibly a member of a database called EAT, Equity at the Table, and it possibly could be an interesting model. I'm saying this now as opposed to sending an email, but for the need for mentorship, not necessarily literally this website, Equity at the Table, but it's focused on food, which I'm thinking of because much of what was spoken about tonight was somewhat related to food. But yeah, it's an idea. It's a very simple database for people to reach out to women of color in particular who are in food. And perhaps something that African Services Committee could do in the future is to create such a database, super simple website, for people to sign up for. And EAT is like a wonderful model, but it's super simple, and it sounds like there's so many people in the room who are interested in finding mentors and being available for mentorship.
So I think a great way to do this, Clancy, would be, I said this was going to be about hashtags. If we could perhaps put all that information, right, on that hashtag ASCInnovate. I already have a couple of community groups that I would love to put on there, including my own website, TRUEAfrica. I think if anybody has any ideas they could share, let's all go to ASCInnovate and see what we can share there.
It could start, sorry to interrupt, it could start with a simple newsletter if everyone leaves their email addresses as they're going out, and then you can have like a weekly newsletter and then escalate and build, as Claude was mentioning, to a hashtag that we can all throw ideas out there.
And please know that we will be in touch. We have, especially if you registered or emailed one of us, you continue to be part of our database. And you know, we've started an interesting conversation, and this panel is intended to be the first of many conversations, and just in terms of connecting. And I'm, you know, really, I'll let you say your final words, and then I'll sort of give a thank you as well.
I just thank you, Zoe. I just wanted to really thank this wonderful panel and this wonderful audience, because you were co-creators of a fantastic conversation, very, very honest, and we just have to keep it going. So with that being said, I want to thank Hawa Hassan. I want to thank Shimite Obialo. I want to thank Pierre. #ASCInnovate.
What they're doing and support their efforts, because they, you know, they have social organizations that are really supporting both on the continent and immigrants here. So the idea is if you support them, that support goes further, right? And we hope that you will do the same thing with African services. Look us up, volunteer, join us, donate, right? If there are any legal minds here, we're looking for pro bono services, because we have tons and tons of clients who need that assistance. Thank you for coming out this evening. I appreciate all of you, and we hope to see you at another event.